Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for the delay here. We got a little tied up with session, but wanted to make sure to still come chat with you all. This week we're doing a joint press conference with the House Republicans. We're happy to have them with us here today, both leadership and AFA members, in addition to our caucus and the Senate Republicans. And what we wanted to do was provide kind of an initial response to the both the change package and where we think the budget is heading overall. I'm not going to go into too many details myself. I'll save that for the folks that are coming behind me. But I do want to say first and foremost that the reality is here we're talking about substantial excess money and what to do with it. Everything is funded. State government is funded. Public schools are funded. Municipalities, local budgets, they're all funded. So what we're talking about quite literally is the excess above and beyond everything else. And that's what the fight is going to look like over the next month or so. And that's where I think you're going to see the biggest contrast between Republicans and Democrats. The governor didn't leave any money really on the table, except for quite literally that small amount for the special appropriations table, but spent everything in her change package that was possible to spend, and did not capture any Republican priorities that you've been hearing about since months ago when we had the initial debate on the Part 1 so-called budget. I think that's really a missed opportunity, but we're here today to extend that olive branch and say, look, if you actually do want a 2/3 budget, there are plenty of places where we can negotiate with you. Certainly, some form of structural tax relief makes sense, and now more than ever in the state's history, I think. But there's a number of other areas as well, areas where her budget's lacking, places like mental health, places like reforming welfare, finding ways to lower our energy costs, protecting kids in public schools. All of these are things that are priorities of ours. You've heard us talk about that all year long, and she failed to capture really any of it in her change package. And so there is still a window of time here to operate within. We look forward to having those conversations with her in a meaningful way, and one that actually is going to incorporate the things that we've been talking about all along. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to House Republican Leader Bill Falkenham. Thanks.
Thanks, Troy. Well, that was a great presentation by Senator Stewart. Really, state government is fully funded. That's the big point that we want to emphasize here. Governor Mills and the Democrats said it was fully funded when they shut down the legislature 3 months early and then called us back into a special session. Now, in this change package, they have a new spending proposal from the governor that leaves nothing for families struggling to make ends meet. It makes state government even bigger while making working families smaller. Taxpayers are being asked to fund 400 new positions, even though there are 2,000 unfilled government positions currently. Because that state government is fully funded, there is more than enough money. It is time to put Maine's working poor first, not last, when it comes to the money that is being taken from them. With the prices and cost of living increases, people need our help. The people who work every day to pay the taxes that fund the state government. Government should not prosper off the backs of people falling further behind. We need to respect and support them, prioritize them over the special interest that exists off their tax money. It's time to put people back home first. We can do that by letting the people keep more of their money. Now is the time to lower taxes for Mainers, especially low and middle income that are paying for everyone else.
Hi, I'm Jim Libby. Nice to see you today. Just like to point out that it's 3 o'clock and we had a 12:30 today, and I want to apologize for that. There's some things beyond our control around here, but I noticed that I was here with you. I noticed everybody stayed with us, and we appreciate that a lot. We're asking for a $400 million tax cut, and we've been working on several income tax cut proposals in the taxation committee. And honestly, there's proposals from Democrats and there's proposals from Republicans. And I think that's what's interesting, is that we're looking at trying to reduce the pressure on family budgets. How do you do that? You know, you hear a lot of talk about, okay, well, energy, it's a tough one. Electricity cost per kilowatt hour. We're in trouble there. What can we control? We can control income taxes that we're asking people to pay for. And when I looked at Senator Baldacci's bill, I just kind of smiled. It's a good bill. What we've done here is we have a number of cuts. The first thing I'd like to say is, I don't know whose business would be run on the basis of let's create new positions while we have a couple thousand unfilled. Who would do that? And who would do that? Nobody would do that, but that's what, unfortunately, that's what the Democrats are doing. I honestly think, though, that the governor will come and negotiate with us. I think we're going to have a very good close to this session, because I think everybody realizes that's not how you run a business. And so there is room. There's plenty of room for this $400 million tax cut. We're looking at agency structure too. The DHHS, their budget's ballooned to $3.5 billion. It's the 62% increase since the $2.2 billion that it stood at just 5 years ago. So in addition to the positions, which we've been consistent about, in committee, as these reports come out, the committees have said, look, the Republicans were not expanding the amount of positions that government is going to create. We're not going to do that. There's just way too much slack in this in this entire agency structure. So we are asking that we go all the way back to the 2005 promise that the Democrats made, that we would have structural tax relief. And that's every single person in this room that has worked with us really believes that structural tax relief, and this comes in a lot of different forms. We're looking at expanding brackets potentially. We've got several different documents we're working on. But when it is all said and done, people need this relief. They need permanent income tax, permanent structural income tax relief, and we're excited about it. So that's what we're here to tell you, is that over the next week, you're going to see more and more specifics, and that's coming from leadership, who is trying their best to reach out to the Democrats and say, look, you know, this is what we all need. This is what Mainers need. We have enough revenue to do it, so let's do it. So I'm going to turn it over. Yeah.
All good. I think okay. All right, cool. Happy to take some questions. I know we're running wicked behind right now. But yeah, go ahead.
So, Senator Libby,
Yes.
why are you so optimistic? I mean,
Sorry.
the comments that I've seen coming out of the governor's office and the Democratic office talk about priorities, unmet needs. I've never seen any wiggle room in those statements.
I know, and we heard from Kirsten Figueroa that, you know, we've got these out years where there's liability. It's the growth in the size of the budget. I don't think that it's a good sell for them. I don't think it's a good sell for them. I think they're going to realize that. That's really why I have maybe I'm a little more optimistic than I should be. But there's a reason we're working on this, and obviously, when you've got Democrats like Senator Baldacci who are talking about the same thing, and I have great respect for him, there must be room for it. And he's not just going to show up, present an income tax bill like he did, the size of it, and just walk away and say, well, I tried. I really don't think that's in the cards for him. I think there's going to be something. And so that's why. Thanks a lot for the question.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the commissioner too, because
Yeah.
she also said that, wait, I actually wrote it down because I wanted you guys to. that tax relief for Maine citizens has never been greater than under this administration. And she said that working with the legislature, they provided $200 million
Yeah.
in ongoing tax
I want to
relief.
thank this guy right here because, and this is something we've been fighting for too. I think that's a popular, that income tax freeze for seniors is a popular program. And there's no reason why we can't have both. We're talking about just over 3% of the budget for this $400 million tax increase. Think about that for a minute, for a tax decrease, excuse me. Think about that for a minute. That's not much when you're looking at the marginal increase in the budget compared to last term, right? That's not much when you're looking at that marginal increase, 3.5% or so, right? So this is something that Mainers need. And because they do, and because I honestly think out there it's relatively bipartisan out on the street, people are desperate for more disposable income. They need money to pay their bills. And, the checks here and there that we send them, that's not going to do it. It has to be structural. It has to be permanent. That's the difference.
Well, the commissioner says that
I gotta-
$200
I gotta jump
million is
in.
ongoing.
I got to jump in
Yeah.
too and just say that, I got to take her at her word when the governor says that she is committed to a 2/3 budget. And if that's the case, then there absolutely is room for some type of meaningful tax relief here. If she doesn't intend to get 2/3, then, I guess she can, proceed forward however she wants. But I trust that that's actually where she's at. She made her first proposal. We're replying with ours. We'll see what happens over the weekend and as we head into next week and more details unfurl here.
Can you give us any details at this point? What are you offering? I mean, you put out general numbers so far, but some specifics.
Yeah, we've got there's a number of spreadsheets that these folks behind me who are all much better with numbers than I am. That's why I went to law school, not accounting school. But there's going to be a lot of information that's unfurled next week down in the committee level. More detail will certainly be coming forward then. But the long and short of it is targeted tax relief that will be beneficial for low and middle income earners in the state of Maine. That's what the proposal is. That's what our proposal is. It's been vetted by many other people outside of our offices to confirm that is going to be what the actual impact is. And so that's what you could look forward to see with where those funds are going to be directed.
So is it, that's what Baldacci, the Democrat, proposed, was targeted tax relief for the lower income bracket, which you've endorsed. Are you thinking of across the board, all brackets, income tax rate cuts?
If you want to jump in and share a little bit, I don't want to overshare here today.
Sure.
It's as if you guys won't pay attention next week if we give you all the scoop now. But
Yeah, wait till next week.
Jack's got all kinds of information, but the long and short of it is, I'll let you just go ahead.
I'm Jack Ducharme. I serve on the House Appropriations Committee, on the Joint Standing Committee for Appropriations. We've been looking at, as Senator Stewart and Senator Libby said, we've been looking at a number of different proposals relative to providing tax relief for Maine citizens. Just think for a minute, in the last 12 to 14 months, the state of Maine has returned $1.5 billion to Maine people in checks. That's clearly, we have too much money coming into, or more money than we need to run state government. So what we have all talked about, including Senator Baldacci, and I looked at Senator Baldacci's bill, I have a bill in, there are several other bills in, and when we say we're looking at different bills, we're not kind of pushing you off and saying we don't know yet because we want to do that. What we want to do is look at these bills, analyze each one of them, and see how they are going to best meet the needs of Maine people. Because that's what we come here to do. We come here to serve the people of Maine. And if we just kind of willy-nilly put out a tax credit or send out checks or something like that, that's really not meeting the needs of the Maine people. Maine people need structural tax reform. And the only way we're going to do it is to take the time to look at these proposals and make sure that they do what we intend them to do, and that is to help out people in Maine who are hurting.
follow Randy's question, Commissioner Figueroa made the argument on Monday before the committee that there is already $400 million in tax cuts in the Mills proposed budget. She talked about the homestead property tax exemption being expanded. Someone just referenced the pension tax cut, the student loan, that Pouliot's bill, and that's $35 million, $50 million, $20 million, and others that she talked about, that there's already $400 million in tax relief baked in. Is that not good enough?
So I think what we're talking about here are two different things. There's actual structural tax relief, which those are not included in, right? And then there's all kinds of different tax maneuvers, all of which, by the way, I want to note, happened previously. Those are in the past, okay? Those are sustaining, ongoing, in what her current proposal is. What do you do with the excess? That is not included in that. So that's a notable difference here between what they're purporting. And I don't disagree that those are tax policies, but that's not tax relief. What we're talking about is changing the structure in Maine to not take funds in and then dole them out to the people that are winners and losers based on whatever the legislature decides, but to actually not take those funds in at all, and not be able to then pick winners and losers on a going forward basis. Does that make sense?
Can I answer that?
Absolutely, jump in.
I just want to jump in on that one because you can't take existing tax relief and say, well, we're not going to cut that out, so that's your tax relief, which is essentially what you're saying here. The governor has identified, and I see in her statement what you're referring to, but you can't take existing things that were passed in previous legislatures and say, well, we're not cutting those out, so therefore you guys already have your tax relief you're asking for. That's just ridiculous to say that. So, I mean, please don't buy that. I mean, that doesn't pass the smell test. The other thing I wanted to go back to was the question you asked, Randy, and I forget exactly what it was the commissioner said, but it was something to the effect of this is needed spending or necessary, needs. Well, that just doesn't line up with what this proposal has. And if you look at the proposal, it's full of new initiatives. You read the lines, new initiative 2, new initiative 2, $10, $20 million. And we just added up real quickly, I think it was $180 million of those type of new initiatives. So we don't need to be creating new programs, and especially the 400 new positions. I mean, there you go right there. You can't tell me that those are needed when you've got 2,000 unfilled positions.
Well, they also point to new spending for opioids, for kids' behavioral health, for adoption and foster care. These are things that you guys do talk about as your priorities. Elderly meals, long-term health care facilities. There's tens of millions of dollars in new spending for that. You all say government's spending too much and it's too big. So what would you cut?
Well, for example, the 400 new positions. I mean, is that a cut? No, that's just not adding 400 new positions. That, for starters, I think that it's lacking in some places. We were talking about all the money that got handed out in new checks. That's essentially what she's proposing to do for the state employees, a 3% one-time COLA, which is a pittance. It's nothing really. It's a $500 check for those folks. We're talking about solutions that help people for the long term. That's why we're talking about structural tax relief, which is ongoing, which is what the people really need. They don't need these one-time gimmicks, these one-time spending, things, because that's just not cutting it for the working people of Maine. And that goes for people that have worked and that are retirees, that are the pensions. These people's pensions, inflation has gone up to 8%, and we're talking about a one-time 3% that doesn't even give any long-term increase to that. That's not satisfactory, and to not give relief to working people. And we have, a number of proposals that will do that, and we'll be putting those forward to the Democrats as soon as next week.
There was a hearing on the pensions today. Do you support 8% matching Social Security on the annual cost of living rise for Maine retirees?
I don't know as I'd go to 8%, but I'd like to do something that was more permanent than a one-time gimmick.
One last question, then we gotta wrap up. Yep.
You do the kind of House Speaker's apparent dispute with the governor over travel rights bills has given you maybe an opportunity to try to have more kind of leverage or power with some of these proposals as they're having this back and forth for
You know, I'd say we're pretty early still in the negotiation process here. I think it's fair to say that everything's on the table, and that we're willing to negotiate with the governor, and frankly, anybody that's actually willing to meaningfully negotiate with us. If she's committed to 2/3, then we can find a way to get there.
I guess just a follow-up question on that, other than.
Is this the last question?
Yeah, other than Senator Baldacci, I mean, do you get a sense that there are any willing negotiators on the Democratic side? You know, have you gotten signals from the governor? Have you gotten signals from anyone in Democratic leadership that they're willing to negotiate on tax?
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't think it's just the governor that wants to get to 2/3 here. I mean, there's the reality is that the public is aware of, because of the great work that you folks all do, of informing them of exactly how much money the state has. They're eyeing tax cuts too. They're eyeing other things like reforms to our welfare system. They're eyeing things like rising energy costs. They're eyeing things like the problems that we have with mental health, particularly in the rural parts of our state. They're concerned about schools and school safety. So I don't actually think that they want to charge ahead without including at least some of these ideas in some capacity into whatever they do with the budget. It's the single most important thing that we'll do in this legislature. And I do think that it'll be a better product, and they know this, it'll be a better product at the end of the day if it is a 2/3 budget and they're willing to work with the other side. That's ultimately what I think the people really want. So
You gotta get one more in there.
I don't think so. I think we're all good. Next week we'll see you on Tuesday, though. Appreciate everybody's time. Thanks so much for coming, and have a great weekend.